Ever wake up to find your entire life flipped on its head over something as absurd as a fence? I hadn't until now. I went out to check on my ranch one morning and there it was, a massive fence blocking the only road that led to my property. And the mastermind, Olivia Strad, president of the HOA, she clearly thought she could throw up a barrier, make the call on her own, and never face pushback. But instead of rolling over, I decided to get creative. That gate, I turned it into my own private toll road. Now, the same folks who tried to box me in have to pay for the privilege of driving home. What would you have done? A couple of years before this mess, I had bought 60 acres of rolling pasture and poured my time, energy, and savings into building a thriving farm. Back then, I believed that hard work and playing by the rules would always pay off in rural America. I see now how nihil macron v that was, especially after learning just how far Olivia would go to sabotage legitimate farming. Most mornings, I'd sit with a hot cup of coffee, watching my 40 beef cattle graze peacefully. That view reminded me why I'd left the corporate grind behind and why I'd swapped endless meetings about quarterly profits for something that felt real. My flock of 300 free-range hens laid eggs that high-end restaurants fought to get. The demand surprised me. Most people can't tell the difference between factory-produced food and the genuine article until they taste it. I'd renovated my barn into a dual-purpose space, equipment storage and a repair shop where I serviced machinery for other ranchers. This wasn't some vanity hobby. Farm egg sales alone pulled in about $1,400 a month, and my direct beef sales to boutique butchers were even more profitable. I was making more than I ever had in the corporate world, and it came with a sense of pride that no paycheck had given me before. Every day brought new opportunities and satisfaction from honest work. Feeding people with high-quality products made the early mornings worthwhile. Farming gave me what my old career cooled into: tangible results, financial stability, and the knowledge that my animals were well cared for. My customers appreciated the consistency, and my income streams were steady, insulated from economic swings and corporate layoffs. Life felt like it was on an upward path until certain people decided my success didn't fit their picture of the neighborhood. What had once been a peaceful dream quickly turned into a fight against bureaucracy and constant threats from people like Olivia. I first met her when she showed up uninvited one afternoon, more like a storm front than a neighborly greeting. She carried herself with the kind of authority that didn't need to be announced, a sharp look that said I wasn't welcome. I was in the middle of replacing corroded fittings on the main water line, trying to prevent a leak that could harm my animals. Her shiny sedan crawled up my driveway as if she were scouting enemy territory. She stepped out in tailored business clothes, completely wrong for the countryside idea, and began surveying my property lines like she was already planning how to take them. She moved with the confidence of someone who thought she had the right to control the space around her. Without even introducing herself, she said, "I expect this operation will meet community standards." Her tone made it sound less like a request and more like an order she expected to be followed immediately. I wiped the grease off my hands with an old rag and tried to keep things polite. "Nice to meet you. I've heard about you." Olivia Strada, the woman everyone says carries a lot of weight around here, I replied, hoping friendliness might soften whatever she was gearing up for. She gave me a curt note, more dismissal than acknowledgement, and then studied my farm like she was taking mental notes. Without another word, she turned, got in her car, and drove off, leaving me wondering what exactly had just happened. Not long after, the letters started arriving, official notices from the HOA almost every day. They accused me of breaking regulations I'd never even heard of. Apparently, my fertilizer schedule violated air quality standards no government office had ever mentioned during my permit process. My livestock feeding routine was labeled disruptive noise, even though it matched the schedule of farms worldwide. The barn, made from natural wood and nearly identical to others in the area, was suddenly out of compliance with the neighborhood's visual guidelines. Even normal chicken behavior was rebranded as some sort of environmental disturbance. They claimed my free-range setup posed a contamination risk, something they insisted could only be fixed with corrective measures that would effectively shut it down. Every so-called requirement they sent my way seemed less about improving the community and more about making it impossible to run a normal farm. Each letter was packed with intimidating legal jargon, twisting everyday farming routines into something that sounded criminal and worthy of government crackdowns. It turned my once enjoyable work into a constant source of stress, with the looming threat that one wrong move could trigger lawsuits or official action that would wipe out years of effort and investment. Monthly home meetings became Olivia's personal stage for attacking my farm. She came armed with slick, high-budget presentations, projecting satellite images of my land like it was part of a crime scene. She had charts showing supposed drops in property values and graphs claiming livestock harm community prosperity. The amount of time and money she poured into this crusade made it clear this wasn't some neighborly dispute. It was a strategic campaign to wipe out farms like mine using bureaucracy and intimidation instead of honest discussion. At one meeting, she declared, "Mr. Hale should reconsider whether a commercial livestock business fits with our neighborhood's character." The people listening, most of them suburban transplants, nodded along despite knowing nothing about farming. They'd moved to the country for the postcard views but didn't want the reality that made those views possible. They wanted green pastures without animals, clean air without the smell of fertilizer, and the charm of country living without the economy that sustains it. Speaking up in that room felt like stepping into a courtroom where the verdict was already written. I told them, "My farm fully complies with county zoning laws, and I hold all the necessary permits." I hoped facts might cut through the hostility, but Olivia's confident smirk told me she believed she held the upper hand. "Compliance and compatibility aren't the same thing, Mr. Hale," she said in that self-satisfied tone bullies use to make themselves sound righteous. She implied my legal, fully permitted farm was somehow bad for the greater good of the neighborhood. It was both insulting and revealing that her goal was clear: push me out. Driving home from that meeting, I realized this wasn't just a disagreement between neighbors. It was going to turn into a war over what this land should be used for, and she had the money, political influence, and stubborn will to make it a fight. A few days later, just after sunrise, I was jolted awake by the roar of power tools. I threw on clothes and ran outside to find a construction crew hard at work. They were putting up a massive wooden barricade across my only vehicle access to the main road. The posts were reinforced, the materials commercial grade. This wasn't a temporary fix, it was a permanent blockade. It felt like catching someone tearing out the foundation of my house. My mind raced to how had this happened without my knowing, and more importantly, how could they get away with it? I approached the foreman, who was directing the crew like a military operation. "What's going on here? Why is this happening?" I demanded. "Neighborhood Security Enhancement Project," he replied casually, handing me papers stamped with HOA approval. The dismissive way he showed the documentation made it clear they thought having the right forms meant they didn't need to warn me or even discuss it with me before cutting me off from the outside world. I stood there powerless, watching them sever my livelihood, fully aware they knew exactly the damage they were causing. They were shutting me down while still hiding behind the excuse of security. Without truck access, feed deliveries for my livestock would stop within days. The animals would begin to starve unless I scrambled to find an alternative. Emergency veterinary services would also be cut off, meaning any medical crisis could turn deadly because no one could bring in the necessary equipment. My entire business relied on vehicles coming and going for supplies, for shipping products, for the professional services that kept the animals healthy and my customers satisfied. Yet here they were, dismantling my ability to operate and claiming it was all in the name of community improvement. I decided the only way to stop the damage before it became irreversibly both for my customers and my animals was to call Olivia directly. She picked up instantly, her voice dripping with suspicious cheer, as though she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Good morning, Quentin. I imagine you've seen our new infrastructure upgrade meant to improve safety and property values for everyone," she said, her tone laced with satisfaction rather than any concern about the very real harm she was causing. "This barricade blocks emergency vet access to my animals," I told her plainly. "If there's a health crisis, they could die before help arrives." I kept my tone factual, avoiding anger. Anything emotional could later be twisted against me in legal proceedings. Her reply was almost mocking. "Actually, if you take a closer look at your deed, You'll see that access corridor belongs to the homeowners association under an easement from decades ago. We're well within our rights to perform maintenance in line with those agreements that take precedence over your property rights. Her absolute confidence made me think she knew something I didn't, to something my real estate agent had never mentioned. "That's impossible," I said, though doubt was already creeping in. "Oh, the county records tell quite an interesting story," she replied, clearly enjoying the upper hand. "There's a right-of-way agreement from 1985 that makes for fascinating reading, especially for anyone interested in property law." Then she hung up before I could ask questions, leaving me to chase the truth myself. 4 hours in the county records office later, I found it, a buried easement giving the HOA complete management authority over a 12-foot strip along my front boundary at the exact space where my access road connected to the main county highway. The legal text was deliberately dense, packed with terms like perpetual ingress authority and community maintenance jurisdiction, the kind of language that hides its real meaning from ordinary property buyers. Translated into plain English, it meant they could block my road any time they decided it was necessary for security, which apparently could also mean necessary to get rid of farms. That evening, Olivia herself came to inspect the barricade. She moved through the site like a victorious general surveying conquered land, dressed in expensive business clothes that sent a silent message about her resources. She ran her hand along the fence posts, clearly impressed with the professional craftsmanship. From the shadow of my equipment shed, I watched, struggling to understand how someone could take such satisfaction in wrecking another person's way of life. "You shouldn't look so defeated," she called when she spotted me watching. "We'll allow pedestrian access during daylight, so you can still get to your property on foot. Vehicle access, however, will be limited to those broken bar emergencies that would require prior approval from the association's leadership." She said it as though granting me a rare favor instead of imposing restrictions that made running a working farm nearly impossible. I gripped the wooden barricade so tightly my fingertips ached, thinking about what her administrative chokehold really meant. My cattle needed to be fed twice a day. There was no way to wait for permission from an office. The chickens required constant health checks and daily egg collection. In an after-hours emergency, when no one was available to grant approval, this fence could mean dead animals. Olivia brushed off my concerns with the cool detachment of someone willing to sacrifice animal welfare for a prettier view. "Perhaps you should have considered neighborhood compatibility before establishing an intensive commercial farm in a residential setting," she said. "Thoughtful neighbors prioritize shared property values over personal profits." After delivering that last insult, she climbed into her luxury car and drove away. That night, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by tools and machinery that had solved mechanical problems for years. I started to wonder maybe property law and neighborhood politics could be approached the same way. While I was mulling it over, my phone buzzed. An email popped up, one that would change everything. Sleep was out of the question. I poured coffee and dug into page after page of legal text, driven by equal parts desperation and stubbornness. By dawn, I'd stumbled on something Olivia had probably hoped I'd never see. Easement agreements work both ways. While an HOA can gain certain access rights, they can't overstep and exploit a property beyond what the agreement originally allowed. I needed help. Reed Callahan came to Minda, my old college roommate who had gone into property law while I'd chosen farming. We'd taken completely different paths, but the friendship had lasted. He had the expertise to untangle what Olivia was trying to pull. "You sound like you haven't slept in days," Reed said when I called, my rushed explanation making my exhaustion obvious. His concern reminded me why we'd stayed friends all these years. He understood loyalty as well as the law. "I can't afford to rest, Reed. Without regular feed deliveries and vet access, this fence could destroy everything I've built," I told him. Reed already knew my land layout and how critical vehicle access was to my operation, so I didn't have to explain much. "Send me the paperwork. I'll review it before lunch and call you back," he promised, his tone calm but confident, the voice of someone used to tackling complicated cases. His methodical thinking paired perfectly with my knack for hands-on solutions. When he called back, there was a sharp energy in his voice. "Quentin, we might have found a weak spot. This is bigger than we thought. He'd uncovered serious legal vulnerabilities in Olivia's Campagna loopholes that could be used to push back. The original easement only allows the association to keep the road accessible and do minimum maintenance, Reed explained, but the special fees they've charged for this fence go way beyond that. It started to click. Olivia's push to expand HOA authority had actually opened her up to legal risk. Those fees make your easement a money-making asset for the community, Reed continued. That changes the legal relationship and it could mean you have the right to charge them for using your land. Then he pointed out another key detail. The HOA had just sent notices for a $250 special assessment to every household, claiming it was for security upgrades as like the fencia that they were calling a community improvement instead of targeted a broken bar. A broken bar harassment. That fee structure proved they were using my land for profit well beyond the simple maintenance authority the easement allowed. Reed's excitement grew as he outlined the legal counterattack taking shape from our deep dive into the documents. What kind of numbers are we talking about? I asked, trying to gauge how far we could push back against Olivia's power play. His answer went beyond anything I'd imagined, and not just in legal justification, but in turning the crisis into a potential income source. Based on their $250 per household a security improvement charge, you'd be well within your rights to collect significant usage fees. $7 per vehicle is perfectly reasonable compensation. Of course, emergency vehicles would be exempt, but regular traffic, that's fair game as repayment for unauthorized commercial use of private land. Reed spoke with a kind of steady confidence that made this feel like justice, not revenge. The moral framing I needed to move forward without hesitation. Case law strongly backed the right of property owners to regulate commercial exploitation through access fees and usage limits. Members who voted for that special assessment can't reasonably complain about compensating the very property owner whose land they're using for their precious a security project, Reed said with satisfaction. The irony made me grin for the first time since this whole mess started. Olivia's plan to cripple my ranch could end up funding it instead of charging her own supporters every time they drove home. But making this happen was going to be a serious challenge. You'll need Arduino microcontrollers and automated toll systems, Reed explained. The legal groundwork is solid, but your biggest hurdle will be building the thing. You've always been good with machines, and now you'll have to step into the digital world. That was the part that worried me. I could handle livestock equipment, repair tractors, and rebuild hydraulic pumps, but programming microcontrollers was a whole new arena. Still, I knew this was the kind of creative problem-solving that separated survivors from those crushed by bureaucratic strong-arming. By the time we ended the call, I was staring at that fence with a completely different mindset. It wasn't just a blockade anymore, it was an opportunity. Olivia's overconfidence had left a hole in her strategy, and I planned to drive a truck through it after charging a toll. Of course, the question wasn't whether I had the legal right to do it. I did. The question was whether I had the grit and technical skill to build something reliable in all weather, on my own. Maybe I could turn her weapon into my asset. Over the next 3 weeks, my workshop transformed from a storage shed into a makeshift engineering lab. I merged farmyard know-how with modern tech, salvaged hydraulic motors from old agricultural equipment to lift the barrier, and programmable microprocessors ordered online to run the automation. I was building something Olivia never imagined possible from someone she saw as just a broken bar simple rancher who wouldn't put up an effective fight. Solar panels provided all the electricity needed, avoiding any utility hookups that might tip off the association before I was finished. Infrared vehicle sensors picked up movement from 75 feet away, giving drivers plenty of notice to see the posted fee and have exact change ready. Large LED displays showed the toll amount in bright, clear digits, easy to read in daylight or at night, giving the installation a professional look. A heavy-duty steel barrier arm blocked passage until the correct payment was confirmed and deposited into a secure vault I welded from thick plate steel. High-definition cameras captured every transaction from multiple angles, ensuring I had airtight documentation if the association's lawyers tried to challenge my work in court. The signs were unambiguous: Private easement access a $7 fee a exact change only a emergency vehicles exempt a verified legal by county records. Everything was built from weather-resistant materials, precision crafted to keep operating through extreme temperatures, rain, or snow. Programming the system proved far more difficult than the physical construction, especially creating logic that could distinguish emergency vehicles from everyday traffic and process payments automatically without human help. There were frustrating setbacks as sensors that failed, payment verifications that misfired during tests, but I worked through them. Emergency responders needed instant, toll-free access, which meant configuring the sensors to recognize official vehicles through visual recognition algorithms. Meanwhile, the payment system had to accept the exact amount before raising the barrier, yet still allow a manual override for special circumstances. Sometimes I wondered if this ambitious idea could really work in the real world. I completed the installation under cover of darkness, making sure everything was operational before any association members discovered their fence had been transformed into a commercial toll gate. Every mechanical component was perfectly aligned for smooth operation, and the electronics were sealed inside weatherproof housings. By sunrise, Olivia's so-called security barrier had become my automated income generator. The very first customer arrived at 8:45 a.m. Olivia herself, returning from her fitness routine in her spotless luxury sedan. I watched her expression shift from confusion to understanding, and then to furious disbelief as she realized what I'd done. Rather than explode immediately, she switched to calculated tactics of photographing the installation from every angle while making phone calls. This installation violates multiple regulations and association rules, she declared through her open window, voice firm and condescending. I stepped out in clean, professional attire, holding the legal paperwork I had prepared for this exact confrontation. On the contrary, I said evenly, this is lawful compensation for commercial use of a private property easement, supported by established precedent. The toll is $7 a exact change preferred for quick processing. Her eyes flashed. Law enforcement will remove this illegal obstruction immediately, she threatened, even as she dug in her purse for the money. You're welcome to contact them, I replied calmly. The toll still applies. She tossed the bills at the payment slot with enough force to make her mood obvious. The barrier lifted, and she sped off. The first week's results proved the system's worth. $430 collected from residents, delivery trucks, and service vehicles, all without another route available. Police investigated several complaints, reviewed my documents, and confirmed the installation complied fully with easement laws. The psychological impact was almost as satisfying as the revenue. People who had cheered Olivia's fence now paid a premium every single time they drove home, a daily reminder of how her overreach had cost them personally. Delivery companies began adding surcharges to cover the toll, doubling the expense for association members. There's a rare satisfaction in watching someone who thought they had all the power realize they misjudged you. Sometimes the smartest counter to administrative bullying isn't a courtroom fight or political bargaining, it's outthinking the opponent and turning their own weapon into your advantage. By the third week, an anonymous tip landed in my mailbox, one that hinted this battle was about to get much bigger. Broken bar, the fight with the association's leadership turned out to be just one piece of a much larger puzzle. One afternoon, a text popped up on my phone that shifted my entire perspective. Impressive work with the toll system. Olivia pulled the exact same stunt on another rancher last year, forced them to sell for far less than the property was worth. What you've done gives hope to others in agriculture. A neighbor who's been watching. That message hit me hard. This wasn't a personal fuda, it was part of an ongoing campaign targeting working farms and ranches. If this neighbor was right, several families had probably been run off their land before they even had a chance to fight back. Not everyone had the resources or technical know-how to counter her tactics. What if this was much bigger than my own ranch? On Thursday evening, while I was counting toll revenue and checking the electronics for routine upkeep, Mrs. Patterson approached me. She was 73, a retired teacher, and had lived here longer than any since before the HOA even existed. She held a worn manila envelope like it weighed 100 pounds, her face marked by years of keeping something important bottled up. "I've got something to tell you about Olivia Strad," she began, her eyes scanning the area like she expected spies behind every shrub. "It's been eating at me for months. Last month, she tried to buy my house through her real estate firm way under market, said your livestock was lowering everyone's property values, and I should sell before the smell got worse." The puzzle pieces started clicking together, revealing something far more calculated than neighborly squabbles. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Mrs. Patterson straightened. "Told her my granddad ran cattle here in the 30s, and I wasn't about to be pushed off my land by some city woman in expensive shoes who's never known a day of real farm work." But now she saw what Olivia was really doing, how these administrative attacks were part of a plan to seize rural properties and flip them for profit. That weekend, Reed and I dug into public records and property transactions using his legal research tools. What we found was alarming enough to merit a criminal probia if we could compile enough proof. Over the last 3 years, Olivia's company had bought 6 rural properties, each one after the owners endured a barrage of mysterious HOA violations and harassment. Once we laid it all out chronologically, the scheme became obvious. Target a livestock owner with noise and odor complaints, bury them in petty enforcement actions until they're desperate to leave, offer to buy their property through shell company SA for far less than market value, renovate, then resell 6 months later for 38–40% more, marketed to suburban families. The real gut punch was realizing how many others might have lost everything without ever knowing they were in a fight. Then came the smoking gun. Reed filed a Freedom of Information request with the city planning office, and the results showed email chains between Olivia and local officials. She wasn't just reacting to situations, she was actively lobbying for zoning changes to limit livestock in residential zones. The kicker? Those rules would hurt working ranches like mine but leave untouched the ornamental horse estates of wealthy hobbyists who posed no threat to her real estate ambitions. The emails proved beyond any doubt that there was calculated cooperation between the association's leadership and city officials, a coordinated effort to wipe out working farms using rules and regulations, not fair competition. Mrs. Patterson soon introduced me to Carlos Martinez, whose family had run a modest horse-boarding business until the previous year. A relentless wave of code violations focused on manure disposal and alleged fly infestations had forced them to shut down. The charges were exaggerated, but they carried enough legal weight to bleed the family dry in court. After months of attorney fees and constant pressure, the Martinses sold their property for $60,000 less than it was worth. The buyer, one of Olivia's shell companies, created specifically to hide her role in snatching up distressed agricultural land. "She destroyed our family's livelihood with lies and red tape," Carlos said, his voice heavy with defeat. "We couldn't afford to fight both City Hall and the HOA, especially when they were working together to break us." Reed's digging into the HOA's books turned up something even uglier. Olivia had funneled more than $18,000 of community maintenance funds into her personal land buying operation, covering legal research and zoning efforts aimed at removing ranchers. That wasn't just unethical, it was felony embezzlement. This was no longer a neighborhood spat. It was a criminal conspiracy involving theft of community resources, property fraud, and the corruption of city planning processes. Reed could barely contain his excitement as he outlined the possible charges that law enforcement could pursue. For me, the realization was sobering that this fight wasn't just about saving my ranch anymore. It was about defending every farm and ranch that had been systematically dismantled by her tactics. With the evidence organized and ready, I arranged a private meeting with Olivia at the local coffee shop. She walked in looking confident, probably expecting a bargaining session, but when I spread the financial records and email chains on the table, her smugness began to crack. "Interesting business model," I said evenly. "Use HOA authority to drive livestock owners out with harassment, buy their land cheap, flip it for suburban development at a hefty profit." Her expression hardened, then faltered as she grasped the depth of what we'd uncovered. "You can't prove anything illegal about legitimate real estate deals," she shot back, though her voice wavered. "Maybe not beyond a criminal court's reasonable doubt," I replied, sliding over more documents. "But I'm sure the IRS would love to hear about the unreported gains from your property flips, and the state licensing board will want to know how you used your HOA to feed your business." She leaned in, the mask gone, revealing the ruthless streak that had fueled her schemes for years. "What do you want?" she demanded. "I want you to stop targeting farmers and ranchers with bogus regulations and harassment," I said, fully aware she wasn't the type to walk away from a profitable racket voluntarily. Her parting words were laced with menace. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mr. Hale. This neighborhood only has room for one successful agricultural operation and it won't be yours." I'd once thought this was about enforcing community rules. Now I knew it was about eradicating every livestock business in the area so she could wring every last dollar from development. As I headed back to my truck, a black sedan caught my eye. The black sedan I'd noticed when I arrived was still parked across the street, its darkened windows hiding the figure inside who had been watching every moment of my exchange with Olivia. "You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Hale. This isn't over," she said before walking away. 3 days later, certified letters hit every mailbox announcing an emergency home meeting. A mandatory attendance is set for Thursday at 7 p.m. in the community center. Olivia didn't waste a second. She moved door to door, painting me as the neighborhood menace, warning that my ranch threatened property values and public safety. Her version of the story turned my agricultural work into an existential danger that demanded swift collective action. While she was working the rumor mill, I spent those days meeting with Mrs. Patterson, Carlos Martinez, and 4 other families who had also received suspiciously low offers from Olivia's shadow companies. Walking into the packed meeting hall felt like stepping into an arena. The outcome would decide if agriculture still had a place in our community or if development greed would crush it entirely. Olivia sat at the head of the table in an expensive power suit, flanked by her loyal board members who still bought into her narrative of protecting the neighborhood. Her slideshow, titled "Protecting Our Community from Agricultural Hazards and Illegal Obstruction," came complete with professional graphics that must have cost thousands. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began with that polished authority she'd used to intimidate past targets, "we are here tonight because one resident has decided his personal profit matters more than your safety and your home's value. Mr. Hale's livestock operation poses proven health risks, spreads contamination, draws flies and rodents, and his illegal toll gate sets a dangerous precedent." She clicked through staged photos of manure in my fields, presented as environmental proof, and paired them with formal complaints about odors. "This ends tonight," she declared, voice dripping with false virtue. "I call for an immediate vote to declare Mr. Hale's toll and livestock operations public nuisance and to take legal action to remove them permanently." Several heads nodded, swayed by her polished production and unaware of the criminal motives behind her campaign. But when her eyes met mine, I could see eye to fear. She knew I carried proof that could collapse her entire scheme. "You're making some very serious accusations about my character," I said, rising slowly with my laptop in hand. "Before anyone votes, I think you all deserve to know what's really driving these attacks." The room erupted in whispers. I connected my laptop, my pulse pounding, and pulled up financial records showing how money funneled into Olivia's personal legal battles, email chains detailing her targeted takedowns of farm owners, and purchase records proving her shell companies had scooped up distressed properties for a fraction of their value. Gasps spread as people recognized their neighbor's address as a families forced to sell under mysterious circumstances. "These are private business matters, irrelevant to tonight's meeting," Olivia protested, her voice trembling now, but the grip she once had on the room was gone. The audience could see the theft, the embezzlement, and the corruption laid bare. I wasn't just defending my ranch, I was standing for every person she'd crushed for profit. Mrs. Patterson rose, slow but steady, her decades in the community lending her words undeniable weight. "Last month, Olivia offered me $60,000 less than my home's worth through her real estate company. She said Quentin's cattle were destroying values and I should get out before it was too late." Then Carlos Martinez stood, holding his own file of proof. "She bankrupted my family's farm with bogus violations and coordinated inspections, then bought our place for $40,000 under its appraisal while we were drowning in legal fees." The final blow came when I put up the last document Reed had uncovered, an HOA financial analysis that revealed its felony embezzlement. I told the shocked crowd. $18,400 of your money gone. Olivia's last, desperate counterattack came fast as she shot to her feet, jabbing an accusing finger in my direction. Mr. Hale has a record of financial troubles. He left his last job under questionable circumstances, she announced, clearly hoping that attacking me personally would distract from the mountain of evidence stacked against her. But I was ready. Without missing a beat, I pulled another set of documents from my folder. Actually, I said evenly, I have your emails with city officials discussing tax breaks in exchange for eliminating agricultural zoning right here in our community. The emails lit up the projector screen for all to see. The room went dead silent except for the slow scrape of Olivia's chair across the floor as she realized there was no escape. Her entire scheme was now documented for prosecution. This meeting is over, she blurted, but the authority she once wielded had evaporated. From the audience, Rita, who had been recording everything, stood up and called out, as residents, you can call for a vote of no confidence right now, removing leadership that's been stealing from you. The motion passed in an instant. 31 voted to remove her from the HOA board. 4 abstained, still stunned, and not a single hand went up to support her. Olivia stalked toward the exit, pausing only to glare at me with cold fury. You think you've won, Quentin? She spat. This town has no place for you. Her threat was caught on multiple phones, adding yet another layer of evidence. The room buzzed with outrage as neighbors absorbed the reality of they'd been lied to, used, and stolen from. Within 2 weeks, the new HOA board implemented a fair system. Households could buy monthly passes for $60, granting unlimited tollway use and ensuring steady revenue from my ranch. It was cheaper for residents than pay-per-use fees, and it finally gave me predictable income to recover from months of costly harassment. The ranch was mine again, but this was about more than my land. It was about proving that no one could rob me of what I'd built through deceit. Olivia's downfall didn't stop at losing her board seat. The district attorney filed a stack of felony charges: embezzling HOA funds, real estate fraud via shell companies, conspiring to manipulate city zoning, tax evasion on unreported profits from fraudulent flips. Once law enforcement grasped the scale of her corruption, the prosecution moved quickly. She was ordered to repay every stolen dollar, plus triple damages under state anti-fraud laws, and another $67,800 on top. With legal fees and interest, she owed over $120,000, wiping out the wealth she thought was untouchable. The State Real Estate Commission revoked her license for good, citing gross abuse of fiduciary duty. Her bankruptcy became unavoidable when the courts blocked her attempts to hide assets in offshore accounts and shell companies. Her career was gone, her fortune gutted, and justice had finally caught up. The judge made it clear just how severe her fraud had been and how many families had lost their farms because of her schemes. Olivia's sentence was 8 months in county jail, followed by 4 years of probation, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. It was a direct acknowledgement of how badly she had abused the community's trust. My most satisfying moment came 8 weeks later, when I spotted a moving truck outside her old house, hauling away furniture and boxes. She was leaving the state to take a low-level sales job, her credit destroyed and her power over others gone. Her luxury cars had been repossessed, her home sold at a court-ordered auction, and her once polished reputation left in ruins under the weight of criminal convictions and regulatory penalties. With her threats gone and her network dismantled, the ranch's transformation accelerated. Local media picked up my story, a rancher who fought back against HOA abuse and WANA, and suddenly, I had support from agricultural groups and rural tourism advocates across the country. People began visiting specifically to see the now famous Tollway Ranch and learn about ways to push back against suburban development. I expanded the operation, offering weekend tours, selling fresh eggs, and teaching sustainable farming methods. Slowly, the community began to heal. Neighbors recognized how they'd been manipulated into backing policies that enriched a corrupt few. Mrs. Patterson decided to keep her family's land, proudly hanging a sign by her gate: agricultural heritage protected since 1935. Carlos Martinez's family sent me a heartfelt card from their new horse facility in a county with stronger farm protections. Watching Olivia's carefully laid plan collapse was a deep, unexpected satisfaction, but the bigger reward was proving that rural landowners could fight and win against suburban encroachment, using legal expertise, technology, and education to protect their livelihoods. Bullies thrive when their victims stay isolated and uninformed. Once we understood our rights and stood together, her intimidation campaign failed. My 60-acre ranch now earns more than I ever made in corporate work, with revenue from cattle, poultry, custom equipment services, tourism, and agricultural education. The herd is up to 55 head, producing premium grass-fed beef, and my free-range hens lay more than 24 eggs a week. But the real victory wasn't the income, it was knowing that criminal assaults on agricultural life can be beaten. Every morning, walking past that toll gate, I'm reminded, sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or retaliation, it's getting paid while the crooks who targeted you face justice. What was meant to end my livelihood became the foundation of something better, a living example that farm heritage can thrive under pressure when backed by smart legal moves and community support. Thanks for watching my journey. Remember, farmers and ranchers have legal protections and technical tools to push back against harassment and predatory development. Don't let anyone fence in your dreams without paying rent for the privilege. I watch the sun set over my pastures, knowing the fight isn't over but also knowing I'm ready for it. If this story proves anything, it's that you must stay alert, resourceful, and willing to fight for what's yours. If you made it this far, tell me your thoughts in the comments, and hit like, subscribe, and share if you believe in defending what's fair. And if you'd like to support the channel, tap that super thanks button below. Until next time, keep standing up for what's yours. Thanks for watching Anna Dramanest.